You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
What a beautiful day for horses in the morning.
You are listening to the #1 horse podcast in the world. Here is your entertaining look at the horse world and the people in it.
I'm Julie Broadway, president of the American Horse Council.
And I'm Emily Stearns, Health, Welfare, and Regulatory Affairs Liaison for the American Horse Council.
And you are listening to the special monthly American Horse Council episode of Horses in the Morning on the Horse Radio Network for November 2025. Good morning, Horse World.
It's time to hear from the American Horse Council in this monthly episode of Horses in the Morning.
So, Emily, I think today's podcast is on a topic everybody in the horse industry can relate to. It's all about volunteers. Every aspect of the equine industry relies on volunteers. It doesn't matter if we're doing trail maintenance, we're doing shows and competitions, clubs, expos, you name it, and everybody needs volunteers. Volunteers increase capacity, they bring diverse skills, they foster community engagement, they help with fundraising, and they keep operational costs down for everybody.
Yeah, and as someone who's organized a competition, and I know you have too, Julie, we know firsthand how important and crucial volunteers are to a successful event. So from organizing ribbons or flat ironing ribbons, that's always been a really good volunteer activity, to watering the plants, being the gate check. They make it all happen. And, I call it volunteer inception. I've spent time as a volunteer coordinator. So at some shows, it's just volunteers from top to bottom. And even more fun, I can actually say, Julie, that I work for you now because 8 years ago, I met someone while volunteering for a horse rescue who introduced me to the Horse Council and encouraged me to apply to manage the Equine Welfare Data Collective.
Wow, boy, time flies, doesn't it? 8 years, golly, I can't imagine. Gosh, there's so much opportunity in volunteering, and it's just a great way to get involved in an industry if you have interests that lie outside of learning to ride or drive a horse or being involved in that capacity. In the recent economic impact study, you know me and my data, Emily, the average respondent to our survey said they used 10 volunteers in the past year, which translated to 2 million volunteers in our industry. We have 2.2 million paying jobs, but we have 2 million volunteers a year that help kind of shore this all up. And I'm going to give one example, and I really want to shout out to Backcountry Horsemen of America. They logged 207,800 volunteer hours in a year, which translates into 12 million human capital dollars of investment they put towards trail maintenance.
And that's just one organization. So if we have over 20 state horse councils, hundreds of breed organizations, thousands of nonprofit organizations, tens of thousands of horse shows and races, our industry need for volunteers is really immense. And I know several people who no longer compete, but love horse showing. And so they love volunteering as a way to stay involved.
So that's the reason we chose this topic today, folks, is we really wanted to delve into one of the most common questions we hear from organizations, whether big or small, and it's, how do you recruit volunteers? How do you keep them happy? How do you keep them feeling fulfilled? How do you keep them engaged so they keep volunteering? So, Emily, we're really fortunate that we got a great speaker today.
Yeah, so today we have an expert on volunteers, DJ Johnson, or David Johnson, and he himself has been a lifelong volunteer, and his day job is supporting and developing volunteers. So we're excited to talk to him, but first, a word from our sponsor.
This segment is brought to you today by Markel Insurance, who has proudly served the equine community for over 50 years, providing insurance for horses and horse-related businesses. While you are focusing on your horse, let Markel protect you. You can contact Markel today for an insurance solution for your horse, your farm, or your equine business needs, and visit markelhorseandfarm.com or call 800-842-5017 to obtain a quick and easy quote from their knowledgeable team. It's your investment, but trust Markel to protect it.
Today, I'm happy to introduce DJ Johnson. So, DJ, please take a minute to introduce yourself and welcome.
Thanks, Emily. So good to be here. So I'm an association executive just like you. I've worked at a variety of associations over the last 20 years, including associations focused in healthcare, the built environment, nonprofit management itself, and communication professionals. But no matter what industry I've been supporting, every association depends on volunteers to help accomplish their mission and goals, as well as give their members a chance to make an impact in the areas that they deeply care about.
To me, DJ, is one of the biggest kind of hooks to getting people to volunteer is they've got something important that they want to contribute to the conversation. So that's really a motivation for them. What do you think is the current state of volunteerism in the U.S. today? Is it waning or is it growing? What?
Well, it's and I love geeking out on this stuff and volunteerism. So it's really interesting because in general, America and Americans have a deep history of volunteerism. It's woven into the very fabric of our democratic nation. Before and after our founding as a country, people would gather and form voluntary civil groups around things that they really believed in, including associations, to accomplish their shared goals and needs. Benjamin Franklin, I think he actually formed like the first volunteer fire department in 1736. And of course, the American Revolutionary Army was all volunteers. No one was getting paid. I think that volunteerism in America is making a comeback. The U.S. Census and some other organizations like the Points of Light Foundation actually track volunteerism across the U.S. And some of the recent statistics say that 28%, or about close to a third of the American population, volunteers in some kind of formal capacity. And that's actually up by about 5% since just after the COVID pandemic in 2021. And actually over half of Americans, 54%, reported providing informal volunteering. So that's things like helping a neighbor with chores or working on informal projects to clean up their communities. And that's actually up from 51% before the COVID pandemic. So I do think that volunteerism, which has always been important in America, and maybe it took a slight dip during the COVID pandemic, but it is definitely rebounding back.
Wow, that's amazing. I had no idea it was that strong. Just for fun, do you tend to see when you look at statistics that it varies based upon generation or age? What we hear from some of the smaller organizations is we're seeing our older generation volunteering less, but we're seeing the younger generation volunteering more.
Yes, I love how in your example there, you were sharing about how, like the different generations respond differently. I don't think that it is that one generation volunteers more than another. What I will say is that I think depending on where someone is kind of in their overall life stage, that impacts their, over how much time and how they can contribute. So someone who is, just beginning their career may not have, or just beginning a family, may not have a lot of time for long-term volunteering. Sitting on a committee, something that requires them doing something every month, every week, every day. And they're looking for a lot more kind of ad hoc, quick things that they know are going to make an impact, but that they have the actual time and resources to do. People, that have more control in some cases over their schedules or that are more established. There is a percentage of people that are retired also that have a lot of time to give. And so the kinds of opportunities that they engage in might be a little bit different than other generations. But I think in general, all generations show a strong kind of desire for volunteering.
Oh, Emily, he's got your number as a new mom. I can so see that you've did a lot of volunteering prior to having this new baby. And I bet you're going to have to slow down on that a little bit.
Yeah. And it makes me think of a phrase. So, we talk about new mom having a baby, it takes a village and all that. And then I saw a follow up to that phrase the other day that was, it takes a village. And to have a village, you need to be a villager. Mm-hmm. And I think that really relates into engaging people to volunteer and building your village and networking, not just for the sake of networking, but for the sake of participating in your community and building your community. So, DJ, why do you think so many people choose to volunteer for things?
Sure. People volunteer for a variety of reasons, but I really feel that, or when I'm building different volunteer programs, I think about it in really two main categories. So some people are motivated kind of maybe a little bit more, depending on where they are in their career stage or professionally, where they might be motivated by their own self-interest and volunteer for something that impacts them personally and directly, something that might increase their personal knowledge or better their community or connect them with someone who's going to help them enhance their career or personal visibility. I think, and there are others that will volunteer for more purely altruistic reasons, to feel like they're making a positive impact in the world or for others or for causes or issues they care about. It helps them to feel better about the world and themselves. But really, for most of us, it's really a mixture of the two. We want to do something that is going to serve maybe us personally through like the causes that we serve or our communities, but that also are benefiting a greater good.
Okay, well, let's get to the nitty gritty, because I know everybody wants to know, what strategies should we be using to encourage more people to volunteer in our industry? Because as I said, we need them, lots of them.
And can I preface this by saying, like, horse shows don't run without volunteers. And that's just talking about horse shows, right? And I've seen so many different associations, like USEA now has the volunteer incentive program where you build points. You can get cross-country schooling dollars for different horse shows and entry fee bonuses and all that stuff. But still, we're thirsty for volunteers. I feel like we never have enough volunteers for some of these hard incentive programs.
Well, so there's a nonprofit that focuses on people who run nonprofit associations, because there really is an association for everything. So ASAE, the Center for Association Leadership, actually did a study of nonprofit organizations to determine why people choose to or choose not to volunteer. So, and it's funny, whenever I present on these kinds of things, a lot of them are common sense, or as my 11-year-old would say, are just kind of those duh moments. But I think sometimes it's important to get back to basics and to the core of, how are you bringing people in? How do people find out information? So the two main things that came out of this study that are most successful in encouraging volunteering is, one, visibility, and really a consistent visibility, which I'll talk a little bit about, and then also the direct ask. So for someone who's never volunteered with your specific organization or group, they may not know even what types of opportunities are out there. Sure, your board or certain committees might be out that are front and center. But as I mentioned before, someone, depending on where they are in their career stage or in their life stage, might think, I don't have time for that, or I'm not really interested in that, but I don't really know how to get involved. So having a regular, visible place to promote your volunteer activities. So it's in the same place on your website, or putting out a specific alert on a specific day on your social media, or in any of your regular communications or newsletters, are definitely very key. Now, it's not just about saying, hey, we need volunteers, we want volunteers. People really want to, as I mentioned, both know what they're doing, know their impact, and sometimes they even want to know that they've got the right skills, or that they can really add to what's going on. And so that's why it's really important that when you're putting out any kind of call for volunteers or describing volunteer opportunities, you need to really give people a clear picture of the opportunity. So that means, what is the time commitment? Can they do it virtually? Do they have to do it in person? Is it only going to be one time? Is it going to be multiple times over a certain period of time? And are there any specific skills that would help the activity? And then also, while trying to keep it short and succinct, you want people to know, what is the impact that they're going to have with that particular activity as well. And I think if you have those things, and if they're out, consistently, regularly, and things that people are looking at, that definitely helps. The other kind of, no-brainer that came out of this study is that no matter what organization, what industry, what kind of opportunity, the strongest ways to get volunteers involved is still the direct ask. We're so inundated with communications and solicitations and opportunities that we see online that we can often tune them out, thinking that someone else will respond, that there's someone else that maybe would be better suited for that. Reaching out to people that you know, sometimes even if it's to reach out to people to get them to reach out to people that they know, it really ends up being a stronger ask to get people involved than just the cold kind of call for volunteers or the unsolicited ask. And I think also, more organizations, I think over the last 10 to 30 years have recognized that volunteer opportunities also can offer an opportunity for access for people who may not normally, get to attend or sometimes even have the resources to be able to maybe attend some of the horse shows or maybe your big gala event if you do fundraisers. So thinking about, how could we leverage this so that people can give back, but also it gives people who could be really great leaders, could be really involved members, and give them more access. These are all things that I'll say that I'll look at when I'm building different volunteer opportunities.
In terms of that, kind of thinking of all the different ways we could be encouraging, and you kind of just touched on this a little bit, but I think too, and again, I'm just using horse shows as the easiest example for us, but we also have therapeutic riding. They use a lot of volunteers for horse leading and getting kids ready to get on horses and all that kind of stuff. But in terms of getting, I think for us, we would benefit so much if we could get non-horse people engaged in volunteering, right, Julie? So,
absolutely.
Yeah, in terms, and like that's so many benefits. One, it gets you bodies to volunteer. Two, it opens up the horse industry even more. And why wouldn't we want more people exposed to our industry? But there's still definitely a limiting factor, both inside our industry and outside of it, of getting people involved in volunteer activities. So from your perspective, DJ, what do you think some of those limiting factors might be, or what do you see as limiting factors? A little more specific than the last question of kind of what drives people to get involved.
Sure. So besides not knowing about, what are the kinds of volunteer opportunities, I think there are, really two main things that come up again and again in terms of these obstacles. So one, for those of us who really are the bleeding hearts and really want to make a difference, or let me ask you the question, Emily. So Emily, when you were volunteering, were you only volunteering for one organization?
No, I've volunteered. There was a year I was volunteering for, and I'm sorry, these acronyms probably aren't going to mean much to you, but that's okay. Julie will get it. I was volunteering for NEDA, which is the New England Dressage Association. I was volunteering for the ARL, which is the Animal Rescue League. I was also volunteering for the local therapeutic farm. And I was volunteering for my mom's church, actually, several times. And I say that as, I don't wake up every Sunday and say, I'm going to church. But if my mom's doing church stuff and she needs help, we'll go help her out.
Yeah, no, and that exemplifies my point beautifully. Most people who volunteer and who are regular volunteers are sometimes holding up to 2 to 3 different opportunities, sometimes at the same time. And so there's a lot of competition, that's out there. And so I think that's why it makes it really important, as I was kind of saying earlier, that you have a regular, consistent kind of either approach or opportunities so that people know, hey, the therapeutic group could use volunteers for their events that they always do on the third Thursday of the month. Something that people can start to count on, that people can put in their schedules so that even if someone is volunteering multiple places, they know that when and how they can make that space. I also think that's why it's really important to make sure that you're explaining or differentiating, kind of what it is about what your organization or what your group is doing that is a little bit maybe more unique. And that might be the geographic area of the people that you're serving. It might be, I was really interested to hear about that therapeutic program, like just being a parent myself and volunteering for a lot of causes that are benefiting the next generation and our youth. I would be really interested in getting involved in something like that. Even, I will fully admit, I know very little about horses, except I have fed a horse an apple once. But I also think that that's why it's important to have that variety of opportunities, because I think sometimes, especially for those people who maybe don't have a lot of time or a lot of conflicting interest, it's really easy to try to find, like one quick, easy reason to think why this wouldn't be the opportunity for me. And I think that often we kind of do ourselves a disservice by we are really good at recognizing our boards, our committees, and all the people who are doing some of the big work so that people think, oh, that's the only thing that's available. I don't have the time for that. And so that becomes it's like their perception becomes the obstacle there. So I think finding ways, and I think and I love if we get a chance to talk a little bit later about recognition and things like that, of finding ways to both highlight and show people that there are a lot of opportunities out there, and then also having some really consistent things that people can plan on. I think those are really two simple, straightforward things that can help people, overcome some of those barriers.
Before we jump to the next question, I'm going to stump a little bit for therapeutic volunteering. If you are near a therapeutic facility, and we can link people out there through Path International, they have lists of all their local facilities. You typically don't need horse experience to be a therapeutic volunteer. They will train you. There are many, many options for being a therapeutic riding volunteer. So putting that out there, putting pressure on you, DJ, right now.
Yes, no, I will expect that follow-up email after the podcast.
So I have to say, DJ, my husband has repeatedly said he is going to buy me a lapel pin that says, "Say no to every ask," because I'm one of those people that when a colleague calls me and says, "Hey, could you help me with so-and-so?" I'll say, absolutely. And I'm constantly volunteering to do something for somebody or for some organization. And so I think the phrase I've once heard is, find the busiest person and ask them, because they're the ones that are going to kind of step up to the plate quite often, but always intrigued with the variety of opportunities that are out there. I mean, to Emily's earlier point, when I went to church this past Sunday, they said, okay, you can help at the pantry. You can help with our secondhand store. They need inventory. They're rattling off just a number of opportunities that are out there. And I think they do a pretty good job of, after a big event, they have everybody stand up and say, hey, we want to recognize all these people. So I totally get where you're coming from. What do you think are some of the best roles or the best activities for volunteers? We often put out a note in our newsletter that says, calling volunteers. We have ad hoc committees. We have specialty studies that we're doing, and we could use some extra hands.
Sure. I think when thinking about volunteer activities, that's great how it sounds like you were already thinking about what are the ad hoc, kind of more logistical, anyone could just show up and do it kinds of things, as well as, like what are those more kind of like long-term, more regular, sometimes maybe like higher leadership skills things. What I always encourage when I have different staff members that are building volunteer activities is I say, take a step back and try to think about, like the different personality types that you often think of in your like friend or professional group or in your local community. So we've got the people who are the really extroverted, who really want to know that they're going to be connecting with people. And in some cases, they're going to be out and be in front of people. So using them for ad hoc kinds of opportunities like serving as greeters even if it's someone, to say, hey, we're going to be posting a lot about this on social media, and we just want to have a bunch of people responding and being excited about it, so it doesn't look like we're just shouting into the ether, things that are going to tie into the personality traits or the skills. There are also other people who are not as interested in kind of being with a bunch of people or being out in front of people who are a lot more analytical, who often are interested in, they want to take your evaluations and actually go through them and make suggestions. Or they would be willing to go to an event and you need someone to maybe keep a list of what went right, what went wrong, so that we can help the committees, for the next event, maybe improve on the experience. And I think, so it's interesting because I'm not describing, say, like specific task, like, well, you can be an evaluator or you can be the person who designs our next program. But I think, thinking about personalities that could kind of fit into the different activities that you offer. And if you can think of someone who is really involved or would be really involved, whose personality doesn't fit into any of the, kind of opportunities that you offer, to think about like, oh, okay, I know that's someone who's really good at introducing people to other people who have money to donate to things, or who have time or services that they would donate to a worthy organization. Really thinking about kind of those, as I said, personality traits and skills, and then linking that back to needs that you have can often be more effective.
She talked about therapeutic opportunities to volunteer, but I'm also thinking, Emily, we've done a couple of improvement days at local horse rescues. You don't have to do anything with a horse. You come and you bang on a fence and you help clean up, or you paint fencing, or you do all kinds of little chores around the rescue that need attention that they don't have the manpower to do. And they're lots of fun and lots of great ways to have some camaraderie and that kind of thing. So we've done a couple of events like that at our conference every year. People should know that we are always seeking volunteers to help with conference. I've got a great guy. He is not horsey at all, but his wife is. And so she comes to conference. Well, he tags along with her and he runs my registration desk and has a great time because he gets to meet everybody as they come and register. And he gets to make lots of friends that way, but has nothing to do with the horse industry at all. So your point is so well taken that there's ways to sort of spiderweb that network out and get people who aren't necessarily horsey engaged.
I would add to that, having been a volunteer coordinator and managing horse shows and all that, I've learned too that you never turn a volunteer away. If you don't have a job for them, you make something up. You keep them engaged. Yeah. Because you want them to come and you want them to have a good time, and they'll tell their friends, they'll bring someone along next time. So maybe on a year where you are really hard pressed to get volunteers, you have this person that you made a job up for them. Maybe you need someone to really hold that parking lot sign really high instead of just sticking it in the ground. And that's a really good way to continue to build your volunteer network and kind of build out your contacts for getting people engaged and keeping them engaged.
And so, it's really shown also that the more engaged someone is with an organization or with the kind of activity, the more positive they feel about it. And so I know Emily and I and other people in association management, we really depend on creating, I think, these good experiences, because that also retains members and actually builds stronger members that will be out being evangelists kind of for, kind of your causes and your organizations.
I have another big feeling too that, and this is a personal kind of way I do things, but if I have a volunteer, unless they're screwing something up in a way that is ruining something, they can't do it wrong. That it might not be the way I do it, but they can't do something wrong unless it's, they're jump judging and they marked a horse over a fence and the horse stopped and ran the other way, something like that. But if you don't like the way they're putting the bags in the trash cans, not your problem. The bags are in the trash cans. It's happened. Let them take ownership of it.
DJ, as we start to wrap up, what other thoughts or insights do you want to share
Yeah, I know you mentioned wanting to talk about recognizing volunteers. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I loved, Julie's example there about, at the actual event itself, asking, like the volunteers to stand up and getting recognition there. I think that, there's many kinds of recognition, but like immediate recognition is really important. One of the things that they kind of say in the art and science of volunteer management is you want to try to make sure that the amount of time between when someone has completed a task that you want them to be recognized for and when they are recognized is very short. Now, I think it's also important to think about, going back to maybe the reasons why people are volunteering and think about how the recognition that you're giving can reflect that. So say if it's someone who is trying to get their name out there in the community or who is newer to like the profession that you might be supporting, making sure that their names are included in one of the regular communications that you send out that's going to be visible to the most people possible is probably going to be more valuable to them in some ways than just getting thanked at the event. For other people who are more focused on, I think, the altruistic reason. So say for, I think, Julie's example of people who are showing up to help beautify maybe a space, kind of for activities or for horses, for them to get maybe some kind of thank you that shows now someone using the facility of something that they worked on, or, maybe signed by, the staff or the people who they really ended up impacting the most. Like that's going to make more of a difference in some ways, getting thanked, like that way. And and I think that like as we're talking about recognition and kind of insight, since I know we're getting close to time, I think that when it comes to creating a volunteer experience or keeping them engaged, I always try to think of it's 4 F's. At some point, if I can think of a better consonant to use, then I will. But but for now, let's just go with the 4 F's. And so there are 4 things that I try to think about anytime I'm designing a volunteer experience. So first, I think about first timers. And so that means like, how am I describing the opportunity? How am I going to train a volunteer that comes in that may never have done this before? And then how am I going to make sure that they understand the impact that they're giving? Now, that information is valuable for everyone, not just first timers, but that's the kind of lens that I think about. The second thing that I think about, and I know we use this in religious organizations a lot, fellowship. People are getting involved because they want to connect with other people. So it's really important that you build into your activity, whether it be icebreakers, introductions. Some people, they get permission and give a roster of all the people who participated, but think of some way that's going to help them connect to the other people that are doing that activity. And the third thing is the fun or the feel good. If someone enjoys an activity, they are more likely to come back. And if they know the impact that they're making and they feel good about it, they're going to talk about that with a lot of people. So you want to make sure that that's built in as well. And the last thing, which relates to what we were just talking about, recognition, really is the follow-up. I can't think about how many times I may have volunteered for an organization for the first time and I was never thanked or acknowledged, or there was something that maybe didn't go so well and I never got an evaluation about that. And that definitely impacted whether I thought about volunteering with that organization again. So you need to think about what's going to happen with the volunteers after, so that hopefully you can start the whole cycle over again and get them volunteering for you again.
Well, I want to touch on the fellowship one really quick, because I love that thought and the word it goes together. So just for everybody out there, like for me as an example, I went from being a heavy competitor and a heavy trainer to having my horses at home in my backyard. And a really busy season for me now is getting out to 200 or 300 paces a year. And volunteering is a really great way to keep myself in my local community, because otherwise I'm just at home by myself with my horses and I wouldn't really have a community because I'm not out trucking around. I'm not seeing kids at barns and all that stuff. So the big community in our area is all the local trail rider groups. And I think of our state horse councils, Julie, that have all those volunteer hours that need trails maintained. And the fellowship is a really big part of why people participate in that, I think.
Yeah. So I was going to close up this segment by saying, if you're listening to this podcast and you want to volunteer, you contact us at the American Horse Council, info@horsecouncil.org, and we can pair you with a great volunteer opportunity. Like Emily said, we've got a vast network of rescues and therapeutic riding facilities that always need volunteers. We're constantly being asked by various organizations that are part of the industry who are putting on an expo or an event or something. Hey, we really need some people. Emily talked about the trail maintenance stuff. So Backcountry Horseman's always looking for people to come out and help them on some trail maintenance stuff. So lots and lots of different ways to get involved. But to DJ's point, it doesn't have to be just manual labor. There's lots of other ways to volunteer in the industry too. We do a lot of research at the American Horse Council, and it's not uncommon for us to say, hey, we need to find somebody who's got a good analytical mind who can go through this data and tell us if they see some gaps or some holes or they see some trend we didn't see or whatever that looks like. And we really value people who can make contributions like that.
And I'm sure state horse councils would love some volunteer advocates to come out to City Hall and help figure out local ordinances and go up to the state capitol and be thumping on legislators' doors.
Yep, indeed.
And Julie, I will give you one more resource as well that might be helpful. So there's an organization called, it's the Taproot Foundation. So like to Taproot, and they actually try and link up professionals that are looking to give, in some cases, pro bono time. So in some cases it could be finance professionals with budgets or auditing or taxes, or people that are more analytical about things that will look at your data and come up with insights. And it helps those professionals because it does give them that feel good, but then often they can log those hours and then their organizations get a tax break from that because of the hours that they donated, that if they had charged you, market rate would have been X number of dollars. So taprootfoundation.org is a great place to go to. And I know that they try to connect people to nonprofits, and sometimes they'll even put up your volunteer postings as well to help you get more volunteers from maybe a more public arena.
Awesome. It's been a long time ago, but I once did some work with a group called SCORE, which is your senior professionals who are looking in their retirement age to contribute back something. And they are a wealth of knowledge to help you with all kinds of operational challenges that you might have in an organization. DJ, this has been a great conversation. We may have you back for part 2 on a later episode because there's so much to this that we could just keep talking about.
Or who knows? I feel like we should drag him to conference next year, Julie.
I know. I'm thinking the same thing. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
So the next segment today is brought to you by Merck Animal Health. Merck Animal Health believes that if we all do right by the horse, we'll never do wrong. That's why they're driven by their unconditional commitment to the horse and the veterinarians and the communities who support them. From infectious disease tracking through equine respiratory biosurveillance programs to building a sustainable profession through the veterinary well-being study to creating equine health products with the highest level of safety and efficacy, Merck Animal Health is unconditional. It's just who they are. And you can learn more about Merck Animal Health at mercanimalhealthusa.com. So everyone, for today's legislative and regulatory update, we're helping everyone understand what happens when we have a government shutdown. But first, we have a little PSA that Emily wants to share.
Yes, and we've mentioned this before in our newsletters, but I've recently seen some articles circulating social media, and that's about CBD and blood tests for horses for performance-enhancing substances. So here is our PSA and an encouragement to join the AHC and get on our newsletter list to learn more. So the point of this PSA is not to debate if CBD is a performance-enhancing substance, but instead to let you know that even if you are not feeding your horse CBD supplements, but that also topical CBD creams and hemp-based bedding, so hemp-based shavings or bedding pellets, which can be ingested accidentally by your horse, can all cause positive test results for performance-enhancing substances at a horse show, which will then result in a disqualification. And depending on the governing body, very long permanent ban or a temporary ban, something like that. And again, we're not here to debate what's right or wrong. We just want to let you know it's worth considering your feed supplements and topical products and bedding products if this is important to you in your daily adventures.
Exactly. And again, we'll be doing another article about this in our newsletter, so make sure you sign up. Now we're going to move on to our main topic. What happens when you have a government shutdown? And I'm going to start by saying that really, we hope by the time this episode airs, first Tuesday of November, that the current shutdown will be over. So we're sending that out in the universe and keeping our fingers crossed and saying our prayers that this thing is going to wrap up here pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I'm operating on the, very Pollyanna assumption that it will be. I don't have a crystal ball, but the longest government shutdown so far was 35 days, and I'm hoping that no one feels like beating that record. So, Julie, let's start with the legislative side. What exactly is a government shutdown?
Well, in the simplest terms, a government shutdown happens when people in charge of the country, Congress and the president, can't agree on a plan for how to spend the government's money. And at the end of the fiscal year, typically by October 1, Congress has the ability to simply extend the most recent budget if a new budget has not been approved yet.
And so, Julie, what happens if they can't agree on a new budget and don't agree to extend the current budget?
That's how we get a shutdown, folks. And there's a long list of things that continue to operate during a shutdown and some that don't. So during a shutdown, both the House of Representatives and the Senate stay open and keep working. The House usually writes and passes the first version of the government's budget. The Senate reviews it and it makes changes, and both must agree before the government can reopen. But in the meantime, agencies are really hit hard.
Exactly. And for us, that's where the industry sees the biggest impact during a shutdown. So some services like import and export inspections and quarantine are considered essential, so they stay open. And part of that is because they are funded by user fees. So they're paid for by the people directly. They're using their services, so they get to stay open and operating. But other areas like the Department of Interior, so the National Park Service, and a lot of different aspects of the USDA inspection services, so a lot of equine health support outside of direct import-export needs have to cease operations because those staff aren't being paid.
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue typically for our industry is that most agency staff are not in the office. And many of the ones that are continuing to work are working unpaid until the budget is approved. In USDA, the Department of Agriculture alone, 42,000 employees have been furloughed until the shutdown ends, and that's about 50% of staff. So other agencies, such as Department of Interior, which again, as Emily said, handles the National Park Service trail system, have over 60% of the employees that are on furlough. All of that means that if you want to go out and you want to take a trail ride, it's likely that you're going to get to a park that either is not staffed or does not have some amenities or maybe even isn't open because they don't have adequate resources.
Yeah, or if there's a big tree down on the trail and you can't get through, there's no one to cut it out. So this also means that federal grant recipients, such as our own Equine Welfare Data Collective and many equine assisted services, are not receiving funding for their programs during the shutdown. And to further complicate things, the current administration has been moving forward with layoffs of furloughed employees. So we saw over 1,000 employees laid off from the CDC earlier in October. So this means that when the shutdown ends, we will see lasting and permanent reductions in force, so further reductions in employees. And while that might save the government money in the long run, it can also complicate the functionality of a lot of services and programs the horse industry and others rely on. So just in CDC alone, there's a lot of health education. There's tick disease education that's not going to happen if those employees don't exist. So, Julie, I think the big question is, how does the shutdown end and what can the average person do about it?
Well, of course, that's the $3 million question. It's a great question. And we're starting to feel a little like a broken record sort of at this point. But we really need you to call your legislators and tell them that you want them to vote to pass a budget. It has to be a bipartisan agreement, so it doesn't matter which color you vote. Call your legislators and tell them you want them to pass the budget.
I think at this point, we just tattoo it on our foreheads. Call your legislators, because that seems to be the theme of this entire year.
Yes, totally. And as always, we are happy to help you identify your representative if you don't know who they are. We'll sign off by once again encouraging you to sign up for our newsletter to stay informed of the current federal topics impacting the industry. And you can do so at www.horsecouncil.org. And I'm just going to close with this one thing. If you do nothing else, join so you can get the newsletter and you can keep abreast of what's going on with New World Screwworm, because it is imminent and we are quite distressed about that. So lots of moving parts as it relates to that one particular disease outbreak. Thank you for joining us today. We'll provide more numbers and links in our show notes. We invite you to support our beloved industry and join the American Horse Council and earn a free subscription to our monthly newsletter. Also, right now, we are having a membership drive campaign, and you, if you join now, can be eligible to win some fabulous prizes. So go to our website and check that out. Also, our newsletter and our special bulletins share the latest in all the legislative happenings, federal and state, as well as information that's just good for horse owners to know about.
And you can follow the American Horse Council on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, X, formerly Twitter, and LinkedIn. And you can also subscribe to this podcast's RSS feed. And you can subscribe to Horses in the Morning on any podcast player and find all the shows, including ours, on the Horse Radio Network at horseradionetwork.com.
As we always like to close and say, we are #Here for Horses, and we love our volunteers. Have a great day.